Let's begin. This is the 49th presentation in a year of the Parayana, which is 52 as a set. And we're coming to a rounding of the presentations as a four-part weaving by 4 quarters, which are 4 angles of a square of attention, a focus, to get the picture, or as they used to say in the British Empire, the big picture. And all of the images are moving because this is a moving picture. And like a movie, it has, when it's epic, a very huge technical cast. Even though the cast of characters may seem quite large, the technical cast is larger. And the audience will be there. Right now, it's a personal campfire. And next year, we'll open it up to the council fire. And then in 2016, we'll light the beacon. Our quality of understanding of life, of society, of person, all of that is a pattern and texture of a weave. And the loom by which all weaves occur in that ilk is the way that time and space weave together into a fabric of what we call the universe, rather colloquially and glibly as it's beginning to turn out. But nevertheless, space-time is a fabric that is pliable. It's not just a plane. It doesn't just stay on the loom, but it comes alive on a very large loom. And civilization on this planet is now about 6,300, almost 6,400 years old. And this particular loom has more dimensions than a plane. It has a three-dimensional, a different quality coming into play so that the loom, with its moving picture, its motion picture, is in high definition 4D. All of this has a very large periodicity. In the natural cycle, the prep for this was a series of species that occurred on this planet over millions of years, and goes back now by late 2014 in this photo from the web site of quantum gravity. This is the skull of one of the first hominids on the planet, lived with a group of about 30 other individuals in what is today Chad, in the African Sahara Sahel. And this cranium is 7 million years old. It is already an upright biped with teeth that are not fangs, with the beginnings of a cranial super development from primates like the apes or the monkeys, or the baboons. And we are the inheritors of a new past that now stretches back in terms of our species' origins 7 million years. So it's rather useless to fantasize about aliens coming from somewhere else and developing us. We have developed rather well and have come to a very classic watershed, a threshold where the plane of the picture is now a motion picture in high definition 3D, which we can make virtual so that we can step into an interface with it, and you will find on the net an article about the development in holographic projection, and I'll bring it in next week, that includes having the ability to have a tactile feeling quality in one's interchange with the hologram that is lifted off the plate, the page, into mid-air, into the space of time-space, so that one can not only see, but one can touch, one can manipulate, and used, for instance, just for instance, in surgery, it is going to be possible within a year or two for surgeons to have a holograph of something, an organ that they need to operate on, and they will be able to have a tactile 4D interfaceable hologram of what this organ is in this patient at this time and what they need to actually do to give a healing correction, among several million other examples. What is important is not these achievements so much, extending the new past of our species back 7 million years. Adam's 6,000 years literally is a couple of minutes ago. What's important is that this threshold is the most crucial threshold of all. It is a threshold in civilization which has a very large frequency of energy. It's the frequency of time. And so it's a time form, evidenced, related, referential way of doing an analytic, scientifically and historically, as well as an aesthetic, artistically, visionarily, and finally coming to understand how a symbolic integral of this is able to understand in colossal, massive, magnificent depths, widths, heights, and organic conscious participation. What it is that is occurring as we live. Not now, but in something more powerful than a present, and that is presence. And so the consciousness of presence is of extraordinary interest and usefulness at this particular, not moment, not time, but in a conscious time, space panorama of challenges and explorations. One of the qualities that we're developing during this whole year, the Parayana, is that other versions of this threshold, this shift in time form on a massive scale, major scale, have happened before. And that one can now, through this work, actually be able to do an analytic, to do a filled out live history, which then can not only give us an analysis scientifically, but inform in a kind of a recursive quality of appreciation of silent, humble humility, the wonders of the prism of our person and our persons together in a new quality, not of a society which is largely cultural or even multicultural or even expanded to kingdoms knit together, become super kingdoms, become empires, become world orders. All of that is a cartoon fare next to the actual history in face of the science and the art. The vision opens up freely as a differential, not an integral circle, but a differential weavingness that has an art and a science to it, but has a visionary and a historical transform to it. And like all other time form thresholds, it's incumbent on us not just to be aware or even just to recognize, but to begin to participate in the ecology of conscious dimensions and to find that that four-dimensional cycle, which we call the natural cycle, includes all phenomena, inorganic to organic, pre-organic, all phenomena and all noumena, the way in which one can be aware to the point of even a refined cognition of what it means. This threshold, a shift of major time form, is both promise and challenge at the very same time. Arnold Toynbee, when he did a history of civilization, eventually in 13 volumes, published by Oxford, I think I've mentioned several times over the last decades, I spent a week with Toynbee and his lovely wife in San Francisco at the PBS station, KQED. And the manager, Mr. Day, was doing a series of interviews with Toynbee. And Toynbee's theme in study of history was that he had studied the species of civilizations. At that time, he had made an analytic that included a list of 28 civilizations, 27 of which were dead, and that the 28th was dying. His takeaway from that was a motto: a challenge demands a response. If there is no response if it is an inadequate response, if it is an excessive response. Not only does the challenge win, the entire civilization dies. Rather fast. Faster than one would like to think. Not in a day, but already in a generation, one would notice, and in 3 generations, it would be irreversible. It could be a long whimper, as T.S. Eliot said, instead of a bang, but not a very pretty whimper. This threat of the challenge is emphasized at a midpoint of this very large time form of civilization, as we've been talking about all year. And since the very large time form is 2,000 years, the 1,000 years millennium is the very place at the center where one puts the finger, and if you pluck the strings, then with the challenge unresponded to, you get an apocalyptic tone. When you don't know what to do, or you're not going to do it, or you're going to botch it, or you're going to overdo it, all other choices than meeting it go against the quality of symmetry that the universe as a 4-dimensional weaving requires for it to be real. So that the dimensions of the ecology of consciousness need to join in the weaving and need to pay attention to the loom of time, the picture of all of the images and the feelings associated with them, the feeling-toned images, the moving actions of the rituals, the tactility of the phenomena, all of this for us, not just now, because the present now is a cartoon. The real challenge is in the presence, because presence takes away that illusory present moment, the now, which splits past and future into something which, this is the dead past, your history. And this is the future, we're going to control this. This can be ours. We've got the right world order, and we really control everything, so better join in, etc. That all is predicated on an illusion in the mind, a cognition that there is a present now. Time in that illusory way characteristically vanishes when you wake up. Not only is it not there, it never was there. And given the depth of awakening, it evaporates like the ancient Sanskrit portrayal of a sage confronting a demon, and the demon becomes a wisp of burnt-out shadow looking like a human figure that eventually just evaporates. That's from Valmiki, the author of the Ramayana. The Book of Kells from the 9th century AD. From those great Celtic visionaries who were trying to present the New Testament in translation in the Latin of that era, that day. It was kind of a false dawn of the Carolingian Renaissance, still curling around, and wisps of the Byzantine complexities that had survived the Roman Empire fall, and all sorts of things. One of the pages shows the devil as an evil burnt-out cinder on the margins outside of the text of the gospel being translated, illustrated, and it is the great spirals of the Celtic illustrative symbolism that carry this kinesthetic quality, that it isn't a circle, it's dynamic, so that it's circling, especially around a powerful linearity, making the linearity more powerful, making the path integral more powerful, generates more of the spiraling, which happens to be double. It happens to be chiral, a pair, left-handed, right-handed. That generates the magnetic field. So that electromagnetic energy, when it is really dynamic, analytically, will show, the math shows. William Clark Maxwell, 140 years ago, did the math, wrote treatises, a 2-volume great treatise, published by Oxford at the time. At the Cavendish he was, before retiring to go to his estate in Scotland because he was ill. The more power that a path integral in the electromagnetic calibration of the universe, the more the complement to it, the magnetoelectric dynamic, gains about 1 billion times as much energy. So that one needs to be very circumspect about commandeering power in the electromagnetic dynamic, because 1 billion times that is being invited in and generated and uncollected because it's not collectible. The magnetoelectric power is the light of light, to put it mildly. And you can't measure its weight in terms of protons, or even new particles that have been found by CERN that are 8 times as heavy as the proton, and they're still made of triple quarks. The tripling structure is related to the symmetry of a double transforming, so that it's an ancient wisdom. Some 4,000 years before the Book of Kells, the Celtic architectural vision built a monument in the Boyne River Valley of Ireland. And if you follow the Boyne River inland, it goes not far from Kells. This is a photograph just a few years ago. This monument is called Newgrange. This is from a book, Newgrange, Archaeology and Legend by Michael J. O'Kelly. The subtitle here, The Definitive Account of Ireland's Great Megalithic Tomb. But it isn't a tomb. No one's buried there. What is there at Newgrange is a way of understanding very large time forms in terms of the calibration of the year. That cultures like to keep track of the moons because one can see it. But in order to keep track of the sun, one has to begin to patiently build a computation which is not immediately available for observation and cursorial indication. It's a crescent moon, it's going to be full. It's a gibbous moon, it's going to be dark. The annual cycle is a basic cycle in time-space. Our year is analytical in terms of our star system. There are star systems with multiple suns that have a really complex year. One has to say years with great, magnificent appreciation for civilizations that develop with that complexity. We have a very straightforward quality of refined simplicity. The apparent size of our moon and the apparent size of our sun are a pair. They're a tunable pair, symbolically. All Tibetan tankas will have at the top, in the top angles, the sun and the moon, to make sure that the picture, the tanka, has a square of attention that exceeds that of what you think that you were just looking at, but that there is a profound meaningfulness, not just in the symbolism, but in the history, that the art out of vision is generating, so that one begins to have a science of understanding that it isn't just a universe, that you're dealing with jewel persons, prismatic persons who are like jewels that can be taken from the raw, from nature, and patiently, if one knows how, to cut the facets and take the natural gem quality of the clump and make a jewel. And that what cuts the facets in conscious dimensions is language, and especially the written language. And very powerfully, the written language that is experienced and deepened and widened and heightened, so that it is a written language that becomes able to be an access portal to the visionary differential conscious beyond, opening up a fifth dimension like the thumb, so that one now can not only get it cognitively, but one can grasp the meaning. Not only grasp it, but to utilize it, to use it, to manipulate, to begin to fashion and shape. And out of this comes the quality where the bones leap into tools. The quality that's there in that first illustration that I showed of the 7 million-year-old skeletal remained, and the title of this article is The First Stargazers. That what is distinctive about this group is that there were several mature males. There were more than just several mature females, and there were lots of children. So that it was already familial. But it was familial in a community, not just a hunting group, or a gathering group, or just both ways a feeding group, or a breeding group. They were a group. That quality is there even 70 million years ago when one looks at primates coming in. That became the great apes like the chimpanzees and the gorillas and so forth. That the roots of a cultural grouping go back immensely, long in terms of time. But in terms of civilized time, they go back about 6,364 years. With the advent of the first written languages on this planet in this star system. And so that became like a threshold that was something, as the development occurred, that one could look back and utilize and manipulate, deepen, widen, heighten the meaning of the symbols of the written language so that one learned to read. Not just to take a signal response, but to develop a comprehension. Not just a perception, and not quite yet a conception, but an apperception that the meaning can be developed as well. And so about 4,000 BC, one came to understand that our species of hominid, Homo sapiens, had crossed a threshold and began to recognize that for a very long time they had been doing something that is really profound. They had been organizing an arcade of images so that as one would take someone in a maturing age mode and take them through the gallery of the images in a particular order and do it in repetition over a long enough period of time that they would grow used to having this kind of early comprehension that this is something that was before hidden and now is rather secret, because these images are not just out where they weather, but they're taken underground into caves, Paleolithic caves, put on the walls in the darkness, so that there's no natural light of sun or moon. One has to carry little bits of fire in handheld places where animal fat could be collected and hollowed out little stone bowls. And later on, when pottery was made many, many thousands of years later, when Lascaux was discovered in very close to when I was born in 1940, the little clay lamps from 20,000 years before that the artists of Lascaux had made were found. There, Abbe Ruel found them all of this is pertinent because the presence takes away the false present nowness and allows for the continuum of the energy of time to be experienced in all of its dimensional glory. The 4 dimensions of a natural cycle, 4 symmetrical dimensions of an ecology of consciousness, and together making a 9-dimensional quality, which eventually comes to characterize civilization through written language that increasingly refines until in our time it has become digital to almost any degree of surprising facility. And yet it is only on the surface of a much broader magnetoelectric comprehensiveness that is disclosed in larger, wider, higher, deeper qualities, beginning with a 10-dimensional hyperspace, which is where interstellar civilizations have their concourse, and a mystery beyond that in an 11th dimension of a fertile zero field, sourcing source itself. Let's take a little break.